Before love, before vows, before forever. Like our African parents will pull out their ears. Know your genotype. A simple test today can prevent lifelong complications tomorrow. Welcome to Health Matters, your number one guide to health and wellness. I am Amanda Amos-igbuwe. A general estimate suggests as many as 50% of Nigerians do not know their blood type. A 2023 study narrowed in Lagos showed that only 42.9%, which is less than 50%, of young adults knew their own genotype, meaning over half were unaware of their status. With me here to discuss the life in your veins, the quest of knowing one's blood group and genotype, is Dr. Wilson Utang. Welcome, Dr. Wilson. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hello, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's delve into the heart of the matters now. Can you define the terms blood group and genotypes, and why are they fundamental?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So it's quite a simple question. So blood group and genotype are many times lumped up together, but they mean completely different things. All right. So for the blood group is they're kind of like antigens, right? So antigens are chemicals that are present on different cells in the body. All right. So don't forget that our interest here is the hemoglobin of the red blood cells, right? So their hemoglobin genotype, for example, hemoglobin, and for the blood group, everything is on the red blood cell. All right. So the blood group, they're like antigens that are present on the red blood cells, while the genotype or the specifically hemoglobin genotype is the genetic makeup, genetic composition of a person, basically. So that's a very simple basic answer.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So, how do blood groups AB, and O actually come about?
All right. So don't forget that I mentioned that we have antigens, right? So antigens are, like I said, they are chemicals that are present on the red blood cells. There are two types of antigens, right? There is the A antigen and there is the B antigen. All right. So both of them are the reason why we have the different kinds of blood groups. All right. So the A antigen is present on those with blood group A. All right. Only the A antigen is present on those with blood group A. All right. The B antigen is present only on those with blood group B. All right. While the AB antigen is A and B antigen are present on those with the AB antigen. All right. Can you hear me? Just please confirm that you can still hear me.
I can hear you.
All right. All right.
Okay, so thank you for that. But before I ask my third question, can you please turn on your video, because we can't see you.
All
We
right.
can hear you clearly, but we can't see you.
Can you see me now?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, so let's go to the third question. Can a person's, now faith aside, can a person's blood group or genotype change over time, or is it permanent?
So the very simple and scientific answer to that is no. Is no. All right. I'm happy that you asked the question saying faith aside. All right. So faith aside, it's impossible for anybody's blood group or genotype to change. Right. So these are things that are determined before you are born, right, by your genetic makeup. Right. Genetic makeup comes from both your mother and your father, from both parents, and it determines everything about your life, your DNA. These are things that are embedded in your DNA. All right. So if the DNA of a person cannot change, all right, it's the same way that the genotype and the blood group cannot change. All right. It's just like asking if your aside external factors like surgery, or accidents, or this, the face being disfigured, it's like asking if your face can change over time. All right. That cannot happen, because all of that, your facial features, are all embedded in your DNA. Same way your genotype, your blood group will not change, cannot change. It's impossible for it to change. All right. Faith aside, right? Because these things are embedded in your DNA.
Okay, so let's talk genotype. Yes,
All
from
right.
a research, I saw that there are six: AA, AS, AC, SC, CC, SS. There, it's, funny thing is that I know about three, but before we go to that, briefly explain to us why we are actually familiar with these three, like just three.
All right. So something we say in medicine, we say common things occur commonly. All right. And we are familiar. The simple answer again is that the reason why we are familiar with these three is because they're the most common. All right. AA is common, AS is common, SS is common. All right. So the C expression, the C traits, is not very common. All right. And so that's one of the reasons why we do not hear about any of the other three that has the C trait in it, within it. All right, but we have the S trait, the A traits, they are all very common, and so we can everyone that expresses either A or S or both of them is common.
Okay, so I just have this pressing question, because when I was reading, I saw that, the S, the sickle cell shape, this SS, it has a sickle shape. This C, does it have a
Yes.
particular shape? Like C now, does it have like a C shape or something?
No. So the interesting thing is that both S and C, they disfigure the red blood cell. All right. And the disfiguring of the red blood cell is what gives rise to the S shape with the S. All right. The C is just another way to express that this is a different kind of traits being expressed. Right. There's neither A or S. All right. So no, the sickling of the cell is particular to the S traits.
Okay, so let's narrow down now to, since according to what you said, the other three we are not familiar with is because they are not common. So let's narrow down
Yep.
to the three we are familiar with. So what do they mean in terms of health risk?
So when you say health risks, what exactly do you mean?
We just want to know, because we've heard that AA, they are the strong warriors. AS, it's a kind of mutation. So I just want to know their impact in one's health, and what it exactly means if someone is AS, AA, or SS.
All right. So there is a we are so all of these things are we are trying to express that we are looking out for something, right? So the traits. So there are different things we need to define. There is the sickle cell traits. Sickle cell trait is somebody who has at least one S, right? If you have at least one S, that is AS, SS, SC, right? Any one of those, you have the sickle cell traits, right? The disease is particular to those who have SS genotype, all right? That is the sickle cell disease. So you can have the sickle cell traits, right, which is the AS, without the disease, all right? So, so people who have AS, right, and who are AA rather, both of them are in quote strong warriors, right? They don't have the sickle cell disease. So in that light, there is no health risk to both people, both parties who are AA and AS. They don't have the sickle cell disease. Does the sickle cell traits, that is the S traits, does it affect your ability to fall sick or not, right? That is a different question, right? But if we're talking about the sickle cell disease, both the AA and the AS genotypes do not have the sickle cell disease, and you can, in your words, call them strong warriors.
So I will not call it a theory. Let's say a myth.
Okay.
So we've heard that, people with AS, they're immune to malaria, or like us strong warriors, AA, that we always, are prone to malaria. And I further saw that there's something about AS being a genetic mutation. uh, this myth, debunk it, and if it's true, explain like the process and why it is that the AA people are more prone to malaria than the AS people.
Okay. All right. So there is some truth to the myth. There's some truth to it. So let's go back to talk about the pathology or the pathogenesis of malaria itself. All right. So in the life cycle of the parasites, the malaria parasite, which is Plasmodium, right? That's the name of the parasite. Now, when it enters into the body, there are different stages of the infection, right? So there's a part of the life cycle where it needs to stay in the red blood cell. All right. Now, don't forget that the S traits, right, generally makes the red cell, the wall of the red cell unstable. And that is the reason why we said that, it's when there is the S traits present, right? Or in sickle cell disease, for example, there is the sickling of the red cell. So it makes the wall of that cell unstable. Now, because malaria, the parasite for malaria really needs the red cell to complete its life cycle, right? The sickling of the red cell, both the sickling of the red cell and the unstable nature of the red cell in the presence of the S traits makes it difficult, right? As you can imagine, it will make it difficult for the malaria parasite to survive in the red cell at that stage of its life cycle. So making it, cutting short the life cycle, cutting short the malaria infection. All right. So when you say that um, people with the AS genotype rarely have malaria. I mean, for people who are listening to me who have the AS genotype, I'm sure that they would all confirm to you that at some point in their life they've had malaria, right? It doesn't stop the infection, right? Everybody, AS, everybody comes down with malaria, right? So what is affected many times is the length of the infection and your body's ability to fight against that infection, your body's ability to recover quickly from that infection. And as I've said, that is due to the stability of the red cell in the presence or the absence of the S trait. All right. Now, research has shown that over time, in malaria endemic regions, right, particularly Africa, and some other sub-Saharan Africa, some other tropical regions of the world, because of course it's a malaria endemic region. There's a lot of exposure to the parasites. So over time, the body mutated the gene to to the more more stable, I will call it more stable S, right? So that the body can protect itself infection, from the malaria parasite infection. So there's some truth, like I said, to the myth you referred to.
So let's shift away from talking about A and S. What is sickle cell disease? And apart from the sickle shape, which I did the research on, that makes me feel so much like a doctor. What makes the SS genotype so dreadful?
All right. So I would like to say at this point that the sickle cell disease is a terrible, terrible, terrible disease. All right, it's a really terrible disease. It's at the core of it is a genetic disease, and with everything genetic, everything, when we say genetic, it means it finds its expression from your DNA, right? From your DNA, from your genetic makeup. So with everything genetic, there is a genetic expression to it. It means that it's genetic. It just means that that is the back end, right? For people who are in tech, and for everything at the back end, there is also a front end, right? So the back end is that the genetic makeup, right, down to the DNA has, on the hemoglobin of the red blood cell has the sickle, the S traits, right? Two S traits, one from your mother, one from your father, making the two of them. All right. Now, that is the back end. So, but it doesn't stop there. There is a phenotypical expression. There is an expression physically of the presence of the SS genotype. And so that is the expression, that expression, how it expresses in the body. That is the component of that expression is what is known as the sickle cell disease. All right. And then there are characteristics, there are symptoms and signs of the sickle cell disease, right? There are different syndromes, right, that come about from the sickle cell disease, right? So there is, what is the most common expression is the pain, right? There is terrible pain, right, which can lead to, or as it can be as a result of necrosis at different points. Necrosis meaning death, right, of cells or structures at different points, right? It's a whole, I don't want to go deep into the pathogenesis of the condition, but the physical expression of the presence of the double S, genotype is what is known as the sickle cell disease. All right. So someone who has one S genotype is said to have the sickle cell traits. All right, but not the disease. There's no expression of that disease. All right. The expression of the disease can only happen when there is this, the double S, and in some cases, double S and C, SC genotype, or in very rare cases, the CC genotype.
So while I was, reading about this, I've seen that, as bad as we say the sickle cell disease is, there are some people who have SS genotype and then they rarely have crisis. What can you really say about that?
Okay. So the thing is, what we need to know is that there are factors that trigger the crisis, right? If you know anyone who is SS, who has the SS genotype, you can tell that they do not have the crisis all the time. All right. The crises do not occur around the clock, 247, right? Every day of their life, every day that they are alive. Right. So usually there are things that trigger the crisis, right? The people need to be people who are, warriors, the sickle cell warriors. They need to be taught about these things. Their families, their parents, relatives need to be taught about some of these triggers. Common triggers are different kinds of infections. So if you have um, like a chest infection, for example, right? Or, sometimes even malaria, right? Some of these things can trigger, the unstable nature of the red blood cell, making more cells in the body sickled up, right? When that happens, there are manifestations, different manifestations of, a lot of the red blood cells sickling up, right? Different manifestations. So it reduces the ability of the blood to flow freely through blood vessels, right? Once that happens, is one of the things, it's called the coagulable states, right? And it's one of the things that can cause um, one of the things that can cause blood flow to slow down, right? Leading to different things, right? Different manifestations in different parts of the body. All right. So now, if you can reduce or remove those triggers, if you can reduce exposures to, infective organisms, protect them from, things like sometimes for some people it's even cold, right? So if you can reduce exposure, you can limit exposure, you can reduce the crisis, right? So these are some of the things that can reduce crisis, right? So for people who are more regularly exposed to these triggers, there will be more and more crises. For people who are not as often exposed to the triggers, there are less and less crises.
Let's move to, the marital side. We've heard about compatible genotypes. So, before I ask that question, I saw let's say some months back that, there were scientific innovations where SS partners could actually marry themselves. Now, let's jump back to my initial question of compatible genotypes. With these innovations, these scientific innovations that, we have heard about, would you advise SS patients, because science is unlimited at this point, so would you advise, sickle cell warriors to actually marry themselves? Will you also advise AS and AS to marry themselves? Then what are the compatible genotypes? And if you don't believe in this scientific innovation, what are the implications of marrying someone with an incompatible genotype?
So that is a very interesting question, right? I have very unconventional views when it comes to genotype compatibility, right? My views are very unconventional. I believe that everybody in that situation need to undergo genetic counseling, right? And genetic counseling involves a lot, right? A lot of information, a lot of teaching, a lot of unlearning and relearning, right? In the environment where we find ourselves, right, the simple answer to this question is AS and AS should not marry, right? SS and SS should not marry, right? That is a simple answer. And that answer is good for the bulk of the population, right? It's good so that we can reduce, like I said, when I started this conversation, one of the things I said is that the sickle cell disease is a terrible, terrible disease, right? You do not want anyone, right? Least of all, your immediate relative, your family, your children to go through the sickle cell disease, right? The pains are really bad, right? The crises are terrible, right? And if your child, for example, comes to this world, has the sickle cell disease, and realize that you had a chance to put an end to this, or to not let them have this disease, and you went ahead, many times they would probably curse you or hate you. All right. So that being said, I would like everyone in situations like that, in the AS and AS situation, SS and SS situation, AS and SS situation, to you have to take a very deep, you have to sit down and count the costs, right? The first thing to say about the scientific innovations, yes, there are scientific innovations. Yes, there are ways science can bypass the problem of having a child with the sickle cell disease, right? Because that is the major problem that you're trying to avoid. You're trying to avoid having a child with the sickle cell disease. That is the only reason why people say anybody with the S trait should not marry another person with the S trait. All right. The only thing you're trying to avoid is having a child with the sickle cell disease. Now, there are ways that science can circumvent that problem, right? There are ways that science can circumvent it. The first thing to know about those ways, or that way, there are multiple, right? So the first thing to know about it is that they don't come cheap, right? These ways are really expensive. That is the first thing, right? So if you want to go ahead with it, you need to have a lot of genetic counseling, right? You need to have probably a good geneticist who would guide you through the process over time, right? You need to have a lot of money in the bank specifically, right, for circumventing this problem, right? The most expensive one, which is the IVF plus PIGT, that is the in vitro fertilization with pre-implantation genetic testing, is so expensive. The last I checked is about the entire process costs north of, about $8,000 in Nigeria, to do it in Nigeria. Is it impossible? No. And it's also not 100% guarantee that, because if you know anything about IVF, you know that sometimes it's a 50-50 chance. IVF sometimes it's like a 50-50 chance that it will work. All right, there is the financial implication, there is the emotional implication, right, of trying through having a child, right, the issues with fertility and conception. All right, there are those implications that anybody who wants to go ahead with these scientific innovations would have to sit down and count the costs, right? Am I ready financially? Am I ready emotionally? What if this process stresses me? What impact would it have on my mental health, right? And I would also usually say that once you've started, right, trying for a child and you meet will I say complications along the way, you must also beforehand predetermine that come what may, no matter what happens, I am not going to change my mind and go ahead to have a child with the sickle cell disease, right? Leaving conception to chance. You must at no point leave conception to chance, right? So when it comes to the scientific innovations, all right. So like I said, they do exist. They've worked in the past. I know people personally who have gone through with it and it worked for them. I know people personally, patients, right? I have met them. So it's possible, it works, right? But beforehand, you have to sit down and count the cost. Is this something I want to go ahead with, right? Is this worth it financially, emotionally? Like it would drain you, right? So you need to sit down and count the cost, right? So that being said, I've talked about the scientific innovations. We also need to, for people who do not want to go through with the scientific innovations, you just need to know the people not to get married to. All right. So if you are AA, you are safe. You can literally get married to anybody else, whatever their genotype. All right. If you are AS, you can get married to someone who is AA, but you shouldn't get married to someone who is AS or SS or anyone who has an S trait. That includes, the SC or anybody who has a C trait, right? Those are less common. So, right, if you are AS, don't get married to someone who is AC. Don't get married to someone who is AS. Don't get married to someone who is SS. Don't get married to someone who is SC. All right, if you are SS, the only person you can get married to is someone who is AA. All right, so those are some of the, I just went through the more popular ones. All right, so if you are CC, same thing applies to if you are SS. If you are SC, same thing applies. If you are AC, same thing applies to if you are AS. All right, so it's very similar. The C, you can substitute the C trait for the S traits and you would be fine. All right, but if you are AA, you can go ahead to get married to whoever it is that you like. Let me stop here.
So thank you very much for your broad explanation. So, earlier on, I asked that faith aside, can your genotype be changed? And then I saw that, laboratory scientists, they warn that individuals who undergo genotype tests shortly after receiving blood transfusions may obtain inconsistent results. Remember, I said, can your genotype be changed? So why are we obtaining inconsistent results immediately after blood group transfusion? Is it immediately after blood transfusion, rather? Is it that there has been a mixture?
Yeah, so you answered the question, right? The simple answer is someone's blood is flowing through your body as well as yours. I mean, right? So if that is the case, it would definitely be inconsistent. So whatever that person's genotype is can show on your report, right? So it's as simple as that. You have blood transfusion means that there is someone who is giving you blood, right? That person has a different genetic makeup, probably a genetic makeup that is different to yours, All right, so if that is the case, and blood is drawn from you not too long after blood transfusion, it's very possible that that can be expressed as well in the reports. All right, so that is the simple answer. Someone else's blood is also flowing through your veins. All right, so it's very likely and possible that um, you would that would be expressed in the report.
Okay, so this has been a very rich and in-depth conversation. So let's just for the final questions. Now, between genotype and blood group, during the process of blood transfusion, which is considered, and then what are the effects of transfusing the wrong blood?
All right, so this is a very important question. All right, the importance of the genotype is basically is at the is at the genetic level. All right, it's at the genetic level is where the only time that the genotype is important, right, is when you're trying to create a new genotype, right, which is in conception. All right, so that is the only time that the genotype is important. All right, or let me say the major time. All right, because we never say never in medicine. All right, now, but the blood group is incredibly important in blood transfusion. Is incredibly important in blood transfusion. All right, and don't forget when I started and I defined what the blood group is, I mentioned that there are antigens on the red blood cell. All right, I'm going to go into in-depth explanation now as well for of what that means. All right, let me give you an example. If I am A, if my blood group is maybe A positive or A negative, right? It means that if my blood group is A positive, let's say it's A positive, we're looking at two antigens, right? The first one is the A antigen. It means that the A antigen is present in my body. All right, that's what it means. And don't forget, I define antigen as chemicals that are present on the red blood cells. All right, so now if the A antigen is present in my body, I would have what is called an antibody, right? So everybody has what we call antibodies. Now, antibodies fight against antigens, right? They fight against foreign antigens. So I have the A antigen present. And because I have the A antigen present, I will not now have antibodies that fight against the A antigen. I hope that is clear. All right. But because I do not have the B antigen, I would have antibodies. Naturally, my body will begin to produce antibodies that fight against the B antigen, right? So the body generally tries to keep its borders secure, right? So anything that is not meant to be within the blood, right, will be fought against, right, to the death, right? The body will do everything it can to kill it. All right, so that is what happens. So the instrument by which the body fights against foreign antigens is what we call antibodies. All right, so if I have an antigen present, my body will not produce antibodies against that antigen because my body doesn't want to fight against itself, right? But it will produce antibodies against foreign antigens, the ones that are not naturally occurring in my body. All right, so I'll have antibodies against the B antigen. So now, if for any reason whatsoever, I'm transfused with blood and I get both new antigens and maybe new antibodies into my body, what do you think that will happen? Right? If I have A antigen present in my body and I have antibodies against the B antigen, if I'm transfused with a B blood group, a blood that is B blood group, right? That means that antigens on the B, right? The B antigens will enter into my blood. My antibodies that are against the B antigen will begin to fight. So that's what we call the blood transfusion reaction. That is just one of them. That is what we call the ABO incompatibility. All right. It's very important in blood transfusion. I'm just going to quickly go through the different antigens and antibodies. So if I'm A, that means I have the A antigen, I have antibody against B. If I'm B, I have the B antigen, I have antibodies against A, right? If I'm AB, it means I have both the A and the B antigen, and I will not have any antibodies, right? I will not have any antibodies, and that is the reason why AB are universal receivers. They can receive from anybody because they do not have antibodies that fight, they do not have antibodies that fight against any antigens. So they can receive from anybody. All right. If I am O, it means that I do not have any antigens, right? That's what O means. The O there means is absence. It's not, I have neither A nor B, right? But I would have antibodies to both. What that means is that I can give, that's especially O negative, right? I can give blood to anybody, right? Because I do not have any antigens present in my blood, right? Because I do not have any antigens, I have the antibodies to both A and B present, right? I can give to anybody, but I cannot receive from anybody except O. That is what it means to have O, right? And that is why O negative are called universal donors. They can give to anybody, right? I'll just touch briefly on what the negative and the positive means. Negative and the positive refers to a separate kind of antigen called the resource D antigen, right? So if it's positive, it means that the resource D antigen is present, right? So if you have, like I said earlier, if you have the resource D antigen present, you would not have antibodies to the resource D antigen. Now, if you're negative, AB negative, B negative, O negative, it means that you do not have the resource D antigen. And that is the reason why O negative, they can give to anybody. They don't have A antigen, they don't have B antigen, they don't have resource D antigen, right? Therefore, they can give, they're universal donors, they can give to anybody with minimal transfusion reaction, right? AB positive has all the antigens. They can't give to anybody else except AB positive, right? And because they have all the antigens, they do not have any antibodies, so they can receive from anybody. They're called universal receivers. All right. The resource D is also very important in childbearing. All right. But that is beyond the scope of this conversation, so I'll just stop here.
It seems like I am just so wrapped up in this conversation, and I don't even know that time is fast spent. Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson Utang. You have broadened our knowledge. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so just to take away from this, we normally believe that ignorance is bliss, but not in this case. Knowing your blood group and genotype is not just paper information, but it helps reduce risk factors, and in some cases, love might never be enough, because above all, your blood group and genotype is a vital determining factor. If you have a pressing question and require in-depth answers, then send an email to healthmattersbdtv.ng@gmail.com. I'm Amanda Amos-igbuwe saying, get a blood group and genotype test done. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep watching Business Day television.